Hello, this is Dr. Rosie Kuhn, and this podcast series is called, what is this pod? This is not a podcast series. I'm sorry. I got confused. I'm anxious today. So this is Friday's Feasts on Facebook, and the idea with these talks is to share with you some of what I am up to, what themes show up in my life as a therapist, not as a therapist so much as a coach, my coaching practice, in my work, in my writing, and in my spiritual personal life, all of those places, and share them with you so that you can maybe identify with them or go, yeah, that doesn't work for me, or to go, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Whatever that does for you is one thing. But what it does for me is it gives me an opportunity to think about things in such a way that integrates thoughts so that potentially I can share them with you, and that could be helpful. But for me, it's a way for me to kind of work things through. So this week, what showed up is a couple of things. One is, and as I said in the title below, it's do I have to throw myself under the bus for other people who are not able to make good choices for themselves? So the way this showed up is a client who's been in a marriage for 16 years, and the level of drama that they both came in with, and they have not been able to do much with. It's like, do I need to stay in this relationship because the other person doesn't know what to do or how to do it? Do I need to keep engaging in a way that doesn't work? So that was question number one. Another thing that happened this week is a friend of mine called and said, hey, would you consider working with my daughter? She's an immigration lawyer, and she is up to big stuff because the nature of immigration these days is really horrendous, and the potential for losing her clients, to having to be for them to go back home where there's torture and killing. It's like the responsibility for these people who may be deported is phenomenal, because in her mind, obviously, she is the one that can save them, or her failure can mean death for them and torture and suffering. So it was really challenging to go, wow, that's a lot to be with for a person to deal with that level of responsibility of that level. And so when I started thinking about her, and with this other person who's been married for 16 years, it's like, what are the dynamics? Who are we inside these experiences? And who else is doing this level of work, whether it's in a marriage or as life work, career work, calling, in terms of where there's that responsibility for somebody, the loss of somebody's life. And I started to think about it, and I thought, well, people who are first responders, EMTs, firefighters, other legal people. This friend of mine has been an EMT, firefighter, and sorry, the dogs are now up. She was also a child protection lawyer, and so even in that place where her work is so much about, hang on a second, I gotta close this door. Child protection work is obviously about protecting children, and either way it could be really a dire situation for the children, not good, unless the parents are really taking responsibility for the situation and making changes. Physicians, like I said, emergency people, people who are ministers, who see themselves as responsible for people's souls and spirits, and if they don't do their job well, people's souls are lost, and they feel responsible for that. I know when I was working, my first job was in Nova Scotia at the commission, what used to be called the Commission on Drug Dependency, and it was I was there for 8 years. And when I first started, my supervisor David Cassidy would say, you know, Rosie, you kind of got a Jesus complex here. You're trying to save everybody. And I felt really responsible for for that level of hard work to be responsible for people's lives. And I think about people who are in the detox centers or rehab centers, where they are the first responders, if you will, for people whose life is at stake, basically. And that level of responsibility is really huge. So when thinking about this young woman who is an immigration lawyer and what she's up to, and I think I mentioned the military. I should have if I hadn't already, because it's on my list. The people who are in the military, whose function is to protect us, protect everyone in terms of the freedom to choose. And again, when people are deported, they no longer have the freedom to choose the outcome of their life. So all these different places where people lose the freedom or don't have the freedom, and others are stepping in to support that process, is really challenging. And another one that came up, and I know some of these might sound silly. So parents, we feel like we're first responders. We feel like if we do something wrong, the direness of our actions on our children is huge. We take huge responsibility for that. The decisions to divorce, or the decision for custody, and what's in the best interest of the children. We feel that direness and the failure possibility for people. But even in corporations, I worked and went to school in the Silicon Valley, and that place of corporate, it's like the first responder. Everybody is having to attach themselves to any email that comes their way, even if they're with their children or with their spouse, where they're in a situation where they're engaged in other activity. The first response is to attend to the corporation, as if with the failure of them responding, something bad will happen. So many of us live with this level of stress, of direness in our responsibility to these situations. And it's like, so what? It's like, why am I saying all this stuff? What difference does it make? It makes a huge difference in who we be and how we be in our life, but also what we do and how we be, so that we're not throwing ourselves under the bus for the sake of others. Most of us have a calling to do the work that we do, or the calling to be a parent, so that we have that responsibility. And yet, how do we do this in a way that we don't harm ourselves in the process by throwing ourselves under the bus? So this, again, my friend whose daughter is an immigration lawyer, part of their training to become an immigration lawyer is to take classes in suicide prevention and drug abuse. Not for their clients, but for themselves. Because we see this in a lot of careers where drug abuse or suicide there's a high percentage of that occurring for lawyers and doctors, EMTs. A lot of people have a higher rate of suicide because of their career choices. And that's pretty interesting. And we see that again in terms of stress in the corporations, or places where there's a high level of stress, and how do we deal with stress? Not very well. And so we get sick, or we begin using substances or activities, pornography or retail or whatever it is, to help us cope with and manage our stress and this level of responsibility. So I don't necessarily have any answers to that, and that's what pretty much happened with my client, who's like, what do I do? How do I be with this? How do I take this apart so that I can make sense of it, and I'm not in this insane situation, in the insanity of it, and continue to be in the insanity? And what comes to mind, this sounds simple, but it's huge practice, very challenging practice, is the Serenity Prayer, which is, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. There's so much insanity in this world that we cannot change. Bottom line. And how our children respond to our actions as adults and as parents, as people in recovery, and people who are in fires or emergency situations. We don't know the outcome of their circumstances. But how do we be with that serenity, that I cannot change the things that I can't change? I have to accept this as just fundamental. the second part of the Serenity Prayer, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And part of that is the courage to accept the things, to change the things I can. I can't change the system. I can't change people's orientations. I can't change the direness of any circumstance. I can't change that. But what can I change? What I can change is how I focus or face or be with the situation as it is. And then the wisdom to know the difference. Like, what am I trying to change? What am I trying to fix? And why am I holding myself responsible for the choices that are being made outside myself? And this is where the 12th step comes in as well. I learned a lot when I was a therapist as a clinical therapist in recovery. It's the foundation, I think, of the work that I do at the human spirit level, is being open and willing to accept these 12 steps and principles of sobriety, not only sobriety, but serenity, which one is I have to accept that I'm powerless in situations like this, and that there's the hopelessness of that. And for me, step one of the 12-step program is admitting that I am powerless basically over people, places, and things. And in that place of admitting I'm powerless, it's not like I stop doing what's important to me. In fact, I do more of what I do because I come from that place of, this is not about changing you. This is not about changing anybody or fixing or healing anything. It's really about what's mine when nothing else there's nothing at stake. I can't fix it. I can't heal it. I can't make it any different. So now what's mine? What am I wanting to do? What's my heart's desire? How do I move in the direction of my what I call my calling? So I write, I coach, I train, I paint, and I speak, and podcasts and doing these things. And it's my heart that I'm sharing, and if it works for you, then that's great. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Not everybody is ready or interested in what I have to say or working with me in this level, but this is what's mine. So being able to admit our powerlessness and really work with the truth of that the situations in the world are sometimes so insane. There is no sanity sometimes. And that's part of the 12-step program too, is when we can see our powerlessness, and it's like, I got to turn this over so that I can get some sanity here. And so that's it has been exceptionally, again, helpful for me in this process of being human, is saying, okay, I'm powerless in this situation. Powerless to help this woman who's an immigration lawyer at this moment find sanity for herself, but she can find that for herself with support. So that's really, really important, and that's what I want to share for you, is so many of you are like me or like other people where we want to be so responsible and make a difference in the world, and sometimes we just I don't want you to throw yourself under the bus, in a sense, harming yourself for the sake of somebody else. It doesn't serve you, and then somebody else is there to try to take care of you, and then somebody, it just keeps going on and on and on. Caretakers of elderly people and spouses of elderly people, and sometimes the spouse of the caregiver gets sick because they're not taking care of themselves. They keep throwing themselves under the bus. That may not be the right analogy or the right frame, but that's what I'm using right now. So thanks for being here. I see you here, Ezekiel and Brian and George and Anders and Mauricio and Anders. Thank you so much for being here. And Rahat, thank you for being here. And pass this on if you'd like. And I look forward to next Friday, see what shows up. I have no idea what's going to show up. All right, big hugs. Please take care. Bye-bye.